A few days after this more figs were ready for plucking, and Alfin in his turn set out for the palace. He had not gone far down the road before he met the old man, who asked him what he had in his basket. 'Horns,' answered Alfin shortly. 'Good,' replied the old man, 'horns you have said, and horns let it be.' When Alfin reached the castle he knocked at the door and said to the servant, 'Here is a basket of lovely figs, if his majesty will be good enough to accept them with my humble duty.' The king commanded that Alfin should be admitted to his presence, and a silver dish to be brought on which to lay the figs. When the basket was uncovered some beautiful purple figs lay on the top, but underneath there was nothing but horns. Then the king was beside himself with passion, and screamed out, 'Is this a plot to mock me? Take him away and give him 150 lashes.' So Alfin went sadly home, but would not tell anything about his adventures, only saying grimly, 'Now it is Ciccu's turn.' Ciccu had to wait a little before he gathered the last figs on the tree, and these were not nearly so good as the first set. However, he plucked them as they had agreed, and set out for the king's palace. The old man was still on the road, and he came up and said to Ciccu, 'What have you got in that basket?' 'Figs for the king,' answered he. 'Let me have a peep,' and Ciccu lifted the lid. 'Oh, do give me one, I am so fond of figs,' begged the little man. 'I am afraid if I do that the hole will show,' replied Ciccu, but as he was very good natured he gave him one. The old man ate it greedily and kept the stalk in his hand, and then asked for another and another and another, till he had eaten half the basket full. 'But there are not enough left to take to the king,' murmured Ciccu. 'Don't be anxious,' said the old man, throwing the stalks back into the basket. 'Just go on and carry the basket to the castle, and it will bring you luck. Ciccu did not much like it. However, he went on his way, and with a trembling heart rang the castle bell. 'Here are some lovely figs for the king,' said he, 'if his majesty will graciously accept them with my humble duty.' When the king was told that there was another man with a basket of figs, he cried out, 'Oh, have him in, have him in! I suppose it is a wager.' But Ciccu uncovered the basket, and there lay a pile of beautiful ripe figs, and the king was delighted, and emptied them himself on the silver dish, and gave 5 florins to Ciccu, and offered besides to take him into his service. Ciccu accepted gratefully, but said he must first return home and give the 5 florins to his brothers. When he got home Peppe spoke, 'Now we will see what we each have got from the king. I myself received from him 50 lashes.' 'And I 150,' added Alfin. 'And I 5 florins and some sweets, which you can divide between you, for the king has taken me into his service.' Then Ciccu went back to the court and served the king, and the king loved him. The other 2 brothers heard that Ciccu had become quite an important person, and they grew envious, and thought how they could put him to shame. At last they came to the king and said to him, 'O king, your palace is beautiful indeed, but to be worthy of you it lacks one thing, the sword of the Man eater.' 'How can I get it?' asked the king. 'Oh, Ciccu can get it for you, ask him.' So the king sent for Ciccu and said to him, 'Ciccu, you must at any price manage to get the sword of the Man eater.' Ciccu was very much surprised at this sudden command, and he walked thoughtfully away to the stables and began to stroke his favourite horse, saying to himself, 'Ah, my pet, we must bid each other good bye, for the king has sent me away to get the sword of the Man eater.' Now this horse was not like other horses, for it was a talking horse, and knew a great deal about many things, so it answered, 'Fear nothing, and do as I tell you. Beg the king to give you 50 gold pieces, and leave to ride me, and the rest will be easy.' Ciccu believed what the horse said, and prayed the king to grant him what he asked. Then the 2 friends set out, but the horse chose what roads he pleased, and directed Ciccu in everything. It took them many days' hard riding before they reached the country where the Man eater lived, and then the horse told Ciccu to stop a group of old women who were coming chattering through the wood, and offer them each a shilling if they would collect a number of mosquitoes and tie them up in a bag. When the bag was full, Ciccu put it on his shoulder and stole into the house of the Man eater, who had gone to look for his dinner, and let them all out in his bedroom. He himself hid carefully under the bed and waited. The Man eater came in late, very tired with his long walk, and flung himself on the bed, placing his sword with its shining blade by his side. Scarcely had he lain down than the mosquitoes began to buzz about and bite him, and he rolled from side to side trying to catch them, which he could never do, though they always seemed to be close to his nose. He was so busy over the mosquitoes that he did not hear Ciccu steal softly out, or see him catch up the sword. But the horse heard and stood ready at the door, and as Ciccu came flying down the stairs and jumped on his back he sped away like the wind, and never stopped till they arrived at the king's palace. The king had suffered much pain in his absence, thinking that if the Man eater ate Ciccu it would be all his fault, and he was so overjoyed to have him safe that he almost forgot the sword which he had sent him to bring. But the two brothers did not love Ciccu any better because he had succeeded in what they hoped he would have failed, and one day they spoke to the king. "It is all very well for Ciccu to have got possession of the sword, but it would have been far more for your majesty's honour if he had captured the Man eater himself." The king thought upon these words, and at last he said to Ciccu, "Ciccu, I shall never rest until you bring me back the Man eater himself. You may have any help you like, but somehow or other you must manage to do it." Ciccu felt very much cast down at these words, and went to the stable to ask advice of his friend the horse. "Fear nothing," said the horse. "Just say you want me and 50 pieces of gold." Ciccu did as he was bid, and the two set out together. When they reached the country of the Man eater, Ciccu made all the church bells toll and the proclamation to be made, "Ciccu, the servant of the king, is dead." The Man eater soon heard what everyone was saying, and was glad in his heart, for he thought, "Well, it's good news that the thief who stole my sword is dead." But Ciccu bought an axe and a saw, and cut down a pine tree in the nearest wood, and began to hew it into planks. "What are you doing in my wood?" asked the Man eater, coming up. "Noble lord," answered Ciccu, "I am making a coffin for the body of Ciccu, who is dead." "Don't be in a hurry," answered the Man eater, who of course did not know whom he was talking to, "and perhaps I can help you." And they set to work sawing and fitting, and very soon the coffin was finished. Then Ciccu scratched his ear thoughtfully and cried, "Idiot that I am! I never took any measures. How am I to know if it is big enough? But now I come to think of it, Ciccu was just about your size. I wonder if you would be so good as to just put yourself in the coffin, and see if there is enough room?" "Oh, delighted," said the Man eater, and laid himself at full length in the coffin. Ciccu clapped on the lid and put a strong cord round it, tied it fast to his horse, and rode back to the king. And when the king saw that he really had brought back the Man eater, he commanded a huge iron chest to be brought, and locked the coffin up inside. Just about this time the queen died, and soon after the king thought he should like to marry again. He sought everywhere, but could not hear of any princess that took his fancy. Then the two envious brothers came to him and said, "O king, there is but one woman that is worthy of being your wife, and that is she who is the fairest in the whole world." "But where can I find her?" asked the king. "Oh, Ciccu will know, and he will bring her to you." Now the king had got so used to depending on Ciccu that he really believed he could do everything, so he sent for him and said, "Ciccu, unless within 8 days you bring me the fairest in the world, I will have you hewn into 1,000 pieces.' This mission seemed to Ciccu 100 times worse than either of the others, and with tears in his eyes he took his way to the stables. 'Cheer up,' laughed the horse. 'Tell the king you must have some bread and honey, and a purse of gold, and leave the rest to me.' Ciccu did as he was bid, and they started at a gallop. After they had ridden some way, they saw a swarm of bees lying down on the ground, so hungry and weak that they were unable to fly. 'Get down and give the poor things some honey,' said the horse, and Ciccu dismounted. By and by they came to a stream, on the bank of which was a fish, flapping feebly about in its efforts to reach the water. 'Jump down, and throw the fish into the water. He will be useful to us.' And Ciccu did so. Farther along the hillside they saw an eagle whose leg was caught in a snare. 'Go and free that eagle from the snare. He will be useful to us.' And in a moment the eagle was soaring up into the sky. At length they came to the castle where the fairest in the world lived with her parents. Then said the horse, 'You must get down and sit upon that stone, for I must enter the castle alone. Directly you see me come tearing by with the princess on my back, jump up behind and hold her tight, so that she does not escape you. If you fail to do this, we are both lost.' Ciccu seated himself on the stone, and the horse went on to the courtyard of the castle, where he began to trot round in a graceful and elegant manner. Soon a crowd collected, first to watch him and then to pat him, and the king and queen and princess came with the rest. The eyes of the fairest in the world brightened as she looked, and she sprang on the horse's saddle, crying, 'Oh, I really must ride him a little.' But the horse made one bound forward, and the princess was forced to hold tight by his mane, lest she should fall off. And as they dashed past the stone where Ciccu was waiting for them, he swung himself up and held her round the waist. As he put his arms round her waist, the fairest in the world unwound the veil from her head and cast it to the ground, and then she drew a ring from her finger and flung it into the stream. But she said nothing, and they rode on fast, fast. The king of Ciccu's country was watching for them at the top of a tower, and when he saw in the distance a cloud of dust, he ran down to the steps so as to be ready to receive them. Bowing low before the fairest in the world, he spoke, 'Noble lady, will you do me the honour to become my wife?' 'But,' she answered, 'that can only be when Ciccu brings me the veil that I let fall on my way here.' And the king turned to Ciccu and said, 'Ciccu, if you do not find the veil at once, you shall lose your head.' Ciccu, who by this time had hoped for a little peace, felt his heart sink at this fresh errand, and he went into the stable to complain to the faithful horse. 'It will be all right,' answered the horse, when he had heard his tale. 'Just take enough food for the day for both of us, and then get on my back.' They rode back all the way they had come till they reached the place where they had found the eagle caught in the snare. Then the horse bade Ciccu to call 3 times on the king of the birds, and when he replied, to beg him to fetch the veil which the fairest in the world had let fall. 'Wait a moment,' answered a voice that seemed to come from somewhere very high up indeed. 'An eagle was playing with it just now, but he will be here with it in an instant.' And a few minutes after there was the sound of wings, and an eagle came fluttering towards them with the veil in his beak, and Ciccu saw it was the very same eagle that he had freed from the snare. So he took the veil and rode back to the king. Now the king was enchanted to see him so soon, and took the veil from Ciccu and flung it over the princess, crying, 'Here is the veil you asked for, so I claim you for my wife.' 'Not so fast,' answered she. 'I can never be your wife till Ciccu puts on my finger the ring I threw into the stream.' Ciccu, who was standing by expecting something of the sort, bowed his head when he heard her words, and went straight to the horse. 'Mount at once,' said the horse. 'This time it is very simple,' and he carried Ciccu to the banks of the little stream. 'Now call 3 times on the emperor of the fishes, and beg him to restore you the ring that the princess dropped.' Ciccu did as the horse told him, and a voice was heard in answer that seemed to come from a very long way off. 'What is your will?' it asked, and Ciccu replied that he had been commanded to bring back the ring that the princess had flung away, as she rode past. 'A fish is playing with it just now,' replied the voice. 'However, you shall have it without delay.' And sure enough, very soon a little fish was seen rising to the surface with the lost ring in its mouth, and Ciccu knew him to be the fish that he had saved from death, and he took the ring and rode back with it to the king. 'This is not enough,' exclaimed the princess when she saw the ring. 'Before we can be man and wife, the oven must be heated for 3 days and 3 nights, and Ciccu must jump in.' And the king forgot how Ciccu had served him, and desired him to do as the princess had said. This time Ciccu felt that no escape was possible, and he went to the horse and laid his hand on his neck. 'Now it is indeed good bye, and there is no help to be got even from you.' And he told him what fate awaited him. But the horse said, 'Oh, never lose heart, but jump on my back and make me go till the foam flies in flecks about me. Then get down and scrape off the foam with a knife. This you must rub all over you, and when you are quite covered, you may suffer yourself to be cast into the oven, for the fire will not hurt you, nor anything else.' And Ciccu did exactly as the horse bade him, and went back to the king, and before the eyes of the fairest in the world he sprang into the oven. And when the fairest in the world saw what he had done, love entered into her heart, and she said to the king, 'One thing more. Before I can be your wife, you must jump into the oven as Ciccu had done.' 'Willingly,' replied the king, stooping over the oven. But on the brink he paused a moment and called to Ciccu. 'Tell me, Ciccu, how did you manage to prevent the fire burning you?' Now Ciccu could not forgive his master, whom he had served so faithfully, for sending him to his death without a thought. So he answered, 'I rubbed myself over with fat, and I am not even singed.' When he heard these words, the king, whose head was full of the princess, never stopped to inquire if they could be true, and smeared himself over with fat, and sprang into the oven, and in a moment the fire caught him, and he was burned up. Then the fairest in the world held out her hand to Ciccu and smiled, saying, 'Now we will be man and wife.' So Ciccu married the fairest in the world, and became king of the country. End of the story of Ciccu.